Hey guys, what's up? It's me, MC Matador here, and today I'm bringing you another video. This one's being pre-recorded for Friday, the 28th of August, because, right, I'm in my second week in university. I'm gonna be having a busy weekend this upcoming weekend, so I'm pre-recording this to be uploaded at some point on tomorrow, next Friday. It's Thursday the 27th right now. I'm going home. I'm gonna be having a busy weekend this weekend to celebrate my mother's birthday, as well as their anniversary, which is just a couple weeks prior, and also to get vaccination. I don't want to get meningitis and things because my pediatrician got mad at me. I'm not anti-vax. I just don't like vaccines. Nobody does. Don't like actually getting shots. Anyway, that's off on a tangent. I'm doing a review for Hoosier Hurricane, Indiana Beach in Monticello, Indiana. This is another coaster review. It's the first one I've done in a month. My last one was Batman, the ride, Clones. And a little tidbit about this coaster. This is the first coaster I rode at all in 2020. And I will be covering my full thoughts and give a rank score of this ride, just breaking down the category by category. Anyone who's seen my reviews knows how these work. And I got some interesting things to say about this one. So just stay tuned. I'm going to start off always with the drop. It's an interesting sequence of events because, as you can see in the photo on the bottom right, you typically, the train does a typical thing. It leaves a station, turns 90 degrees to the right, it ascends up the lift hill as normal. But between the lift hill and the drop is that interesting little S bend. It's an interesting little element where the train twists to the right, then to the left, and then it goes down the relatively steep drop. It's like the track is trying to align itself further to the right, which makes sense because they also built the second half of the ride kind of alongside that first half. They also kind of wanted to have more room so that they can build the rest of the boardwalk, which would put things like their antique cars and Lost Coaster and also the bridge getting into the park. So it just makes sense with the land going around it. I just call it, if you hear me say an alignment, the right alignment, I mentioned this element. But yeah, it pretty much makes sense that this thing's here, even though it's a little atypical. The drop, really, that's the most interesting about the drop. It's just adequate. I will say it is definitely better in the back row than in the front, but that's the usual when it comes to roller coaster drops. It's a good enough way to get the ride started, but it's not overall a very memorable drop. I'm having a hard time really remembering the forces. It's just a good way for the ride to pick up speed, so it gets a good 5 out of 10. Just thoroughly average. We have the intensity next, which is really kind of an interesting thing with this ride. It keeps up its speed really much the whole way through. It loses speed at a couple points. It loses speed at the top of the double up, which is the first element, but then it gains it right back diving under a bridge. And towards the back half, like once you start getting towards the very end of the ride, you lose some speed, which was in the Airtime laden, which you'll hear about later, return trip. But considering that this whole ride is kind of built above ground level, and it kind of has to get back up there in order to end, like the track never crosses the land. The station is elevated about like 2 stories above the walkways, and the rest of the ride goes up alongside and above pathways. It's pretty interesting. It's far from the most intense ride, but it isn't a slouch either. Keeps with the speed pretty nicely. 6 out of 10. Moving on, we have the duration. And based off a somewhat dated point of view of this coaster, I calculated the ride time to be 52 seconds from that exact POV, but it can probably fluctuate a few seconds positive or negative. I don't time these myself. This 52 seconds does include the aforementioned S-bend, which, if it were excluded, it would take about a 5-second penalty from the prime ride time. I do think this ride was a little underwhelming in terms of length. It just goes out, turns around, comes back, and really just doesn't wow you in terms of its length. But it's far from the heinousness of other offenders. This is not a ride I generally complain about being legendarily short or underwhelming, but it does leave a little bit to be desired with the duration, so it gets a 5 out of 10 when it'd normally get a 6 out of 10 for having a 50-second duration. Moving on, we have the airtime. This is a common knock on the ride for people who have ridden it, and I agree with this thing, sadly. There are plenty of moments that look like they would give airtime, but they just don't have all that much going over them. It looks like it'll have airtime, but there's not much of it going around. That best moment is in the bottom left. You see the picture of that double up, which is immediately after the drop. The first hill of the double up is the best airtime moment of the ride, which is some moderate floater airtime. There is some on the hills going to the return trip after the turnaround. They're a little better at the start than they are in the end, but really, this thing probably has about a quarter of the airtime it should have if it was running at a good speed. Which that's the problem. Especially in the return trip, this thing doesn't have enough speed to get better forces on each of the elements. It's pretty much a letdown because this ride seemingly was designed with airtime in mind, but really doesn't deliver much on the airtime. It's strange. But yeah, it's not absent. It's just that this thing's a little sad because it was designed for airtime, but it doesn't really deliver airtime. So it gets a below average score of 4 out of 10 on the airtime category. However, compared to the detractors, I do think that this ride is actually smooth. This thing has two complaints, one being not enough airtime, and the other being that it's kind of rough. A lot of people think it's rough. And I actually don't think it's that bad. There's a couple moments where it really does jackhammer you. The bottom of the drop under the bridge is a little jackhammery, as well as that turnaround. And maybe there is a point also with an off-axis airtime hill, which that would be, it's a little, if you don't prepare for it, it can get a little bit of whip and catch you off guard. I also know that this ride is a little better because I rode it in August of 2020. The first drop and the double up had been reprofiled by the new owner, Gene Staples. And consider if things are going to look up, I hope he retracts the second drop under the bridge and the turnaround next, because that would basically make the ride really smooth. I don't really have many complaints about the smoothness. It's above average in terms of smoothness, especially for a wooden coaster, and it's a good ride to marathon in the front. However, since I'm usually being the optimist when it comes to reviewing these things, I review them off their strengths, I'm not really going to dock them any points for it being rough in the back when it's actually pretty smooth in the front. The back is really rougher and it doesn't provide much benefit over the front row. So the front row is definitely the way to go on this coaster. Moving on, we have the Restraints. This thing features PTC trains with buzz bars. This is the first coaster I rode in 5 years with buzz bars. The only other one being Comet at Hershey Park, which I did, like I said, over 5 years earlier in June of 2015. Yeah, this thing features also a seatbelt. Also, if you see the text, Cornball Express also has a buzz bar. If you want me to do a separate review for Cornball Express, I'd be happy to, maybe a few weeks down the road, because I don't want to put consecutive reviews up. The ride-ups do get a little zealous at first, like when they go around checking your seats or seat belts, because they want it as tight as it can be. But since the since the dispatch station is located at the back of the station, you can generally, or if in the back, you can generally loosen the seatbelt on the lift hill and they won't care. The buzz bars do not touch you, and I'm generally a bigger rider. I'm not overweight. I'm not exactly like fat or anything, but I am broad-shouldered, wide-hipped, 6'2", so these things can get a little uncomfortable for me, and that is kind of a thing. The train seats are a little narrow, but that's generally a PTC train thing by default. It's way better than a PTC train with those L bars. But I gotta give it a dock for being a little too gruesome on the hips. But the buzz bars are an absolutely amazing restraint. I'm glad they went with the buzz bars over the PTC L bars, and I hope it stays that way for a long while. And finally, we have the theming. This ride features basically no theming at all. I'm gonna stretch. I think I do remember there being naval flags in the station, but that might be implanted. Like if you look, you cross a bridge over the track to get to the front part of the station, and on that banister looking from the train out to the dispatch, you see naval flags, but I don't remember that for sure. It's just, it might be a false memory, but the waterside setting and the interesting structure, most of the waterside setting would be enough to constitute Hoosier Hurricane. And I really don't like giving rides a 1 for theming. A 2 usually means there's at least some kind of acknowledgement of their surrounding. I don't think I've ever given a 1 for theming on this channel before. I mean, granted, we're in America. I'm an American coaster enthusiast. There's not all that much theming around this country. It's not like Europe or even some Japanese coasters. But yeah, this thing is a 2 out of 10 for theming. Also, now that I think about it in the picture there, you see that, just if you see that little stone, that little concrete wall to the right of the stairs going up to the coaster, that's actually the end turnaround of the log flume. The log flume drops and then at a high speed and then turns around in that little chute. And if you're standing around that chute while a log is turning around, you'll get hit by obviously the front running water that is moved from the front of the log when it goes on its drop at low speed. So if you stand in front of it, you'll get wet, which is weird. I've really never seen that before. You can be going in line for a coaster and you can get splashed by a log flume. That just goes to show how jank Indiana Beach is as a park. It's jank as heck. So overall, Hoosier Hurricane got a total score of 38 out of 70, which is a 5 3/7 or 5.43 out of 10. But since the average score really doesn't mean much in context, you got to go off my score, which is a 6.5 out of 10. Like I said, it was the first coaster I rode in 2020, and with Great America being likely down for the entire season, and the vacations I had to Great Adventure, Great Escape, Kings Island, Cedar Point, and possibly a few others being canceled because of the global pandemic going on, it was a really good way to kick off the year. I got 3 rides on it, 2 in the front, 1 in the back, and with that sort of basis, I came to a consensus this thing is a solid ride. It's my second favorite at Indiana Beach, which I expected to be kind of the middle of the pack, and it just cracks my top 100 overall, even with including defunct coasters. Because I think there's like 2 or 3 defunct coasters I prefer to Hoosier Hurricane, but Hoosier Hurricane's sitting at like number 94 or something. It's a good supporting coaster and a quirky lineup like those of Indiana Beach, and I hope it stays around for a while. And in fact, I just want Indiana Beach to stay around for a while. It just got the new owner for 2020, and I really hope that Mr. Staples puts all the effort in necessary to keeping Indiana Beach running for years down the road, decades even. And any people who are in the Midwestern region, especially those who are in Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, and maybe to a certain extent Michigan, I would definitely recommend coming down to Indiana Beach. But it really isn't worth a major thing unless you're doing a road trip and it's a pit stop for a larger park like Kings Island, Kentucky Kingdom, or Six Flags Great America, because it's kind of off of the fork of those 3 parks, off I-55 north of Indianapolis. It's just, it's not worth traveling long for it, but it's definitely worth traveling to for regional purposes or as a pit stop. And Hoosier Hurricane would be a great coaster to add to anyone's credit count. Then again, I really hate to say this, but Hoosier Hurricane, with a score like that, it's just another wooden coaster. It's a fun one, but it's far from a world beater. But I still like it. So, that concludes my overall thoughts and review of Hoosier Hurricane. I hope you guys have a great insert unit of time here. Oh, it's kind of said it out of order, sorry. I hope you guys leave a like, comment, or subscription if you enjoyed the video. Yeah, I know, I'm really winging it, God. It's 8:30, and it's my friend's birthday today, so gotta do some stuff. Yeah, if you guys have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscription. There it is. I hope you guys have a great insert unit of time here. Stay safe. This pandemic is far from over. And as always, I wish you guys peace.